Graphically, the swamp is one of my favorite settings in gaming. The wet forest depths have been around in video games since the 8-bit era, ever since adventure took form. It's a dark setting, an element rarely talked about, yet the swamp has played a pretty big role in the artistic department of game history. And the most interesting thing is that only in video games has this occurred. Swamps are rarely seen in other forms of media. When they are, it's usually for the purpose of an art gimmick or a stylistic nod. See Evil Dead. Swamp levels are the kind of thing we notice internally. Our thoughts on the matter remain intact.
Well, it's time to open some strange doors. Here are mine.
A swamp level is a dark level. These are often present in the dead center of a game during one of the more despairing hours. But this kind of level design, in both mechanics and art, can evoke a pretty big variety of moods. I'm going to be analyzing 3 very different swamp levels, each of which takes a wholly different concept on the design. Blighttown from Dark Souls, Ms. Ruby's Swamp from Sly Cooper, and Creme Key from Donkey Kong Country 2. In Dark Souls, the poison swamp that sits at the very bottom of the ruins at Blighttown is an utterly hopeless place, and that's one of the great effects the swamp scene can have. It's used to torment the player. It's the same reason so many first-person shooters have been set in the gritty desert, an edgy, destitute setting, or a cruel, despairing environment to darken the action. This isn't my favorite thing about swamps, but it's probably the most notable, and, if you don't look any closer, the most effective. Well, let's look a bit closer. Sly Cooper takes a foreboding turn on the swamp concept. It's the dark voodoo in the bayou sort of approach. Normally, I'd find this to be silly, but this setting is so beautiful that it blinds me from the story. I think that's really impressive when the setting itself distracts you from the narrative. This can be a good thing or a bad thing. You know, whether or not the actors are chewing the scenery, or the scenery is chewing the actors. But take a look at these gorgeous colors, these mesmerizing cel-shaded graphics, and to top it all off, the menacing music. To me, it sounds like rapturous discovery. To you, maybe it just sounds evil. Either way, Ms. Ruby's Swamp illustrates just how big a role music can play in the creation of absorptive depth. Dark Souls is a game without a lot of music, which actually makes it a lot more terrifying. The same can be said for its predecessor. And boy, is Blighttown terrifying. I won't go into specifics about the horror that lies above, but what lies below is nothing but the bare bones of eradication. Everything feels dead. All that waits down here are ruins, lost items, and a swarm of lurching insects, all waiting in deathly corners to ensnare you. Some of them demonic, possibly once human. This game took the Jak and Daxter route of swamp design. Nothing but brown muck. Actually, let's go back a bit further and say the Castlevania 3 route of swamp design. You may expect to find some bugs, and some toads that might eat bugs, but other than that, the least you can be blessed with is Mr. Vile the crocodile. This is more or less the poison concept. A lot of swamps in video games seem to be toxic. What does that say about the design? Are swamps viewed as deathly hellholes, or is it just fun to add dangerous attributes to dangerous-looking things? And oh, swamp water definitely looks dangerous. Believe me, I've explored a real swamp before. If you can believe it or not, I've explored a good mile into a real swamp walking only on rotting tree trunks. This was in Oregon, but I digress. The truth is, poison is not what makes a swamp a swamp. What makes a swamp are 2 things: water and depth. See Diddy's Conquest. A swamp is, in essence, a flooded forest, water being the element that separates swamp level from forest level, a deep wood with a lot of excess moisture. Creme Key is such a place. This swamp is dark without being too dark. While it could have looked a little more realistic and been a little less cartoony, at the least to live up to the nature of the original, I still love it. That massively exaggerated background, those engulfing damp backdrops, that adventurous music. What I love most about swamps or deep forest settings is when the atmosphere possesses so much depth, it makes you feel as though you're inside. And I mean inside the forest. It's when the line between outdoors and indoors feels very blurred. You're deep inside a wet, dark pocket of the world, and it could almost feel underground. I like not being able to see the sky. I like the presence of creatures, beings unseen in the daylight, that only lurk in such dim-lit places. To put it simply, I like to see a cavern of greenery. And through my eyes, the true magic of a swamp environment, especially in gaming, is nothing but depth.
These are things worth noticing. So notice them.
Hey, be sure to check out my game reviews. You can take a look at more of my things below. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to see new Underneath content every week.